Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Hand-picked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, blue label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam. Sam, how you doing?
Hello, sir. I am doing all right. I want to apologize off the bat for all of the people who are probably wondering why this episode is coming a couple of days late. It is due to some technical difficulties and troubleshooting that is entirely on my end and is still ongoing. So if you notice that my mic quality in this episode is a little bit worse than usual, it's because I'm using a backup. But we got it sorted out well enough, right, Mike, where we were like, okay, we can at least record today and talk about the stuff that we wanted to talk about. So apologize if it sounds like I'm only at 80 or 90% of where I usually am, hoping that that's fixed by next week.
We were able to hold off long enough to talk after a win instead of after a loss, like we would have had to do after the Heat game.
Yeah, had to wait until after the Raptors game because we just knew that was going to be a win.
Raptors are actually pretty good, and that was a tough win for the Suns, including the subplot, which is, I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense that this is the subplot today, of Devin Booker getting mad at the mascot for trying to distract him in an empty stadium, which was bizarre, by the way, to watch a game with an empty stadium again. At the end of that game, Booker made both free throws, but was mad about the mascot, rightfully so. I see some Suns fans trying to defend Devin Booker here. I'm not sure I would. I think it's pretty hilarious that he was mad about a mascot trying to distract him at the free throw line. What do you think?
I'm just so mad that this has become the story of the NBA for all of last night. In the same night, it's so frustrating when you wake up and like you can see kind of how the narratives have grown overnight on the social media platforms, on Twitter and Reddit, and just realizing, like, yes, it's funny. It's a funny story. And no, I'm not going to go so far as to, like, defend Book. I know that Book's a whiner. I know that he complains to officials a lot, and this is the type of stuff he does. However, anyone who watched the game could see the full context of the play, that 5 seconds later, Booker was essentially laughing it off. He was, joking around with the bench about the whole situation. Apparently, he made up with the mascot later, if it matters, which is what he told media.
Yeah.
But this was not a serious thing. This was not a serious situation. And so the fact that people ran with it to this extent And instantly the takes came out about, obviously 1,000,001 people had to post about the no double teams in pickup thing from 2 or 3 years ago. And we were just like back to this bullshit on the same night where the Suns took back the best record in the NBA from the Golden State Warriors, won their 31st game of the season. And the only narrative you see online, also was a good game, by the way. I mean, the Suns really struggled, and frankly, I thought the Suns deserved to lose that game against the Raptors. However, it was a close game, came down to clutch time, and was a good game.
Mm-hmm.
And the only clip, I mean, like, you know, Wobe, for instance, the only clip that Wobe shared from that entire game is the Booker thing. Like, come on, dude, are you kidding me? And it didn't spiral out of control until he shared it to his Twitter account. Because I know you would have shared it, or other people within Suns Twitter would have shared it. But as soon as Wobe posted it, that's when it went viral, and that's when you had 1,000 media outlets and blue check marks feeling the need to comment on it. And it's just, I don't know, the whole thing felt kind of slanted to me, and it rubbed me the wrong way, not because I think it's not funny, but just because I think it was an example of where our priorities are so wrong. I want to be able to laugh at the joke, but also there's just a lot of bullshit. I'm not gonna lie.
If anyone else did what Devin Booker did, I would be making fun of it relentlessly. It's funny to me. I roll my eyes at the people who constantly bring up the double team thing, because to me, those people have never played on a team before. Because yes, I agree. I agree that out of context, the double team thing can sound funny as well, but I maintain to this day that if you're working on your game in a summer setting, playing without your teammates, being trapped on the ball and being forced to give up the ball constantly doesn't benefit somebody who's attempting to work on their game. So yes, people say, well, passing out of a double team is working on your game. Yeah, do that with your teammates when you know where they're going to be, when you know exactly what their skill set is and where they want to get the ball. Don't pass to, I don't know, Corey Gooden or whoever's playing with you in your summer league game because you were getting double teamed. I laugh at that. But I do think that the best way for Devin Booker to not get hate for yelling at a mascot in the middle of a game is to not yell at the mascot in the middle of a game.
That's fine. That's fine. But let's just quickly, in the same night, right? The Memphis Grizzlies, who everyone seems to fucking love right now, and I like the Grizzlies too.
They're very good.
But I also think, you know, on Twitter, let's just say there's a lot of people who have a lot of stock in the Grizzlies, specific players who are drafted by the Grizzlies organization, continuing to play well because it makes them feel better about themselves and their place in the universe. So a lot of people online are obviously rooting for the Grizzlies right now, and the Grizzlies are great. And I think we should have an extended conversation. Actually, later on, we're going to cover some questions in this episode, and I think maybe that would be a good time to bring up the Grizzlies in a way that we've never really talked about them in detail before. However, in all that, why do you have a situation where on the same night, Ja Morant is staring down a group of 8-year-old children? Why is that like this beacon of heroism from Ja Morant, like this obvious example of, oh, look at Ja Morant, he's so cool, he's staring down kids? Like, when that went viral, people did not share it with the same sort of tone of discontent that, as opposed to when they talked about Booker. Like, why do we have more of a moral obligation to defend a mascot than these children? I don't understand. It's like, it's just both situations are funny, but the way that people talked about Booker versus the way they talked about Morant in the same night for doing these two things, it's just off. You can tell it's off.
Will someone think of the children?
I don't care about the children, for the record. I don't care about these kids.
That is the average age of Warriors fans. So no matter where he looked in the arena, it would have been a bunch of kids wearing Steph Curry jerseys. I don't think there's any way that Ja Morant could have avoided that after making that shot that he made in that game. So to be fair to him, that is what it is. But yeah, I get it. And I get the frustration because I think for Suns fans, the Suns, you know, retook the best record in the NBA after beating the Raptors, and nobody talks about that. And yes, to be fair,
that's my issue.
That is exactly frustrating. My issue. That is frustrating. But at the same time, it's a funny story, and funny stories will go further than anything else. That's just always how social media has worked. So
funny stories go further than anywhere else unless you're the Golden State Warriors or the Los Angeles Lakers, sometimes the Brooklyn Nets. And that's the frustrating part about it,
Right.
Mike, is you know damn well if the Golden State Warriors had retook the best record in the league last night, there would be people online talking about the actual basketball behind why the Golden State Warriors are so good. There would be viral tweets from all the sports outlets about the impact of Steph Curry and Draymond Green, and they would be talking about the basketball. But when the Suns do it, the only thing they talk about, it's like when the Suns blew out, and look, this was funny too. I'm not trying to rip on these guys, but do you remember a couple weeks ago when the Suns blew out they didn't play the Pelicans. I don't even remember who it was anymore, but the Suns blew out a team on national television, and with the Inside the NBA guys after the game, they had to talk about the game. They rolled a highlight reel, and they were just supposed to give their voiceover over it. And the only thing those guys talked about is they made fun of Zion Williamson's weight. And it went viral because it was funny to hear Chuck talk about how fat Zion was. But there was no actual analysis of the team. On a night where they blew out, and again, I apologize, I can't remember exactly who it was, but on a night where they blew someone out on national television, and obviously that's content that a lot of people like because people wouldn't be sharing it if they didn't like it. So I got to get off my high horse to a little bit and understand that the priorities of the average NBA consumer are just not my priorities, and that's something that I've always known, and that's something I have to make my peace with. But it is frustrating when you see it so blatantly like this. I'm trying to have a sense of humor about it, but also it's just like, damn, can we talk about the team a little bit?
Right.
I'm just trying to get some base level of respect for a team that's on a 65 win pace here. That was already, in the finals last year, had the second best record in the NBA, and has gotten noticeably better. It would be nice to talk about it.
Yeah, and to really just solidify that point, previous to last night, the last time the Warriors were playing the Grizzlies were up in that game, and Wobe had a running tweet thread saying that the Grizzlies' 7-point lead was the least safe 7-point lead. Their 5-point lead was the least safe 5-point lead. Their 3-point lead was the least safe 3-point lead. And then the Grizzlies won. The Warriors lost. So the way that teams are framed relative to their success is going to be dramatically different. And that is true. So I understand how that can be frustrating, but I do find a player yelling at a mascot to be extremely funny, and I can't really get over that. But you mentioned it. The Suns are on a 60-plus win pace, maybe 63. I didn't actually calculate it, 63, 64 win pace at this point. We're now 40 games into the seasons. The Suns are 31-9, and we're about to pass the midway point with the game on Friday against the Indiana Pacers. And we thought that would be a good time to revisit the biggest questions that we asked in our season preview episode at the beginning of the season, and just readdress each one of those questions and see where we're at with each one of those questions. So both Sam and I went back and listened to the episode. If you want to go back and listen to the episode, feel free. It was our season preview episode. We asked the biggest questions. Each of us had questions listed out. And let's go through each one of those now and see where the Suns are at. Sound good?
Sounds good to me. Do you want to start?
Yes. I thought this first one, which was yours, I believe, was a fascinating question that you asked because it was before the Robert Sarver investigation story. And the question you asked, Sam, is will there be any distractions for the Suns that affect their season this season? The reason you asked it when you asked it was because DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges had yet to sign extensions with the Phoenix Suns. Now we know, right, the end of that story is Mikal Bridges signed an extension. DeAndre Ayton is going to be taken into his restricted free agency. The Suns could sign him before any other team offers him a contract, or he could get an offer from another team. That's where we're at right now. But I did find it fascinating that we didn't even know about a massive potential distraction that came like a week later. But yeah, what do you think about that first question?
Right. Well, first of all, as I was listening back, because I didn't make it clear exactly what the context behind the question was right away, so I was trying to remember as I was listening, when did the Sarver story drop? Because I didn't remember. And yeah, I was surprised when it turned out that I was talking about not the Sarver story at all, which wouldn't come out until a couple weeks later, but was talking about the extension stuff. So I think the way you frame this question now is really talking about DeAndre Ayton specifically, because Mikal got his bag. And the investigation with Sarver, it's still ongoing. I think I've heard some people say maybe there'll be an update by the trade deadline or All-Star Week. Yeah, All-Star Weekend is what Dan is reporting, right? I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was the trade deadline. I think it was All-Star Weekend.
Yeah, same time of year.
Yeah, roughly same time of year, within a week of each other typically. So we're certainly waiting for details, and we'll talk about that when they get here. But in the meantime, the way you frame this question is really just talking about DeAndre Ayton. So has DeAndre Ayton's lack of extension caused a distraction and affected the Suns' play? And I think that we can just say the answer to that is an emphatic no.
Yeah.
He's been largely just really, really good. I think it's been interesting seeing him in the first couple games back from post-COVID, where obviously I think his conditioning has been an issue. In the game last night, for instance, he played really well in the third quarter, but he had possibly the worst first half. His first half was the worst half of basketball I've seen from Ayton all year. I'll probably just put it like that, because you were ribbing me a little bit on Twitter. I said he looked invisible, and you said he looks very, very visible, which I think is fair. Like, it wasn't just that he wasn't racking up box score stats, he wasn't getting points, he wasn't getting rebounds, but also it was very noticeable in how often he was out of place on defense.
Yeah.
Just being far too slow to react to plays as they were forming, or when he did react, he would jump too easily at pump fakes,
right?
And just shift out of position in general. So he had a really, really bad first half. He came back with, surprisingly, and I don't know exactly how he flipped the switch so soon, but a pretty damn good third quarter, and sort of played himself back into a position of confidence by the end of that game. So that, for me, there's never been any worry. He struggled a little bit in his first game back too. There's never been any worry about Ayton getting back on track with that stuff. But I did call it out just because his game is so much about the conditioning that even for a guy like him, where he reported supposedly that he was asymptomatic throughout the COVID process, he said he was just like a prisoner for 2 weeks. So it's not a matter of post-COVID symptoms that are affecting him, but more so just that he lost 2 weeks of conditioning and it's taking him a minute to get that stuff back.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair characterization of it, because what you described in the first half is also what the entire Heat game looked like. He was just a little bit out of position defensively. We talked about it on our playback stream as the game was going on. There was a significant amount of times where he was in a drop when he should have been up higher against the shooters that were just killing the Suns in the Heat game. And then I believe that the same thing was essentially happening in the first half against the Raptors. In the second half, the Suns also started to switch a lot more on guys like Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby. You'll remember plays, I'm sure, those who watched that game where Jalen Smith was guarding OG Anunoby, DeAndre Ayton was guarding Fred VanVleet. That was something that happened a lot more in the second half than the first half. And yeah, I think with DeAndre Ayton, I agree with you. I think that he had a much better second half in general than the first half. The Suns were still just essentially unable to secure rebounds. And that's partially on him, and it's the rest of the team too. And I think that it's a particularly bad matchup rebounding-wise with the Raptors, because you're hiding Chris Paul against really long, tall guys that play on their team, and they're just sort of getting around Chris Paul and getting their hands on the ball before anyone on the Suns could do it. Not to mention a lot of three-pointers shot by that team, which end up in long rebounds. So I think there's a mixture of DeAndre Ayton could have done better on the boards, and there was just a bunch of bad luck in that Raptors game. But I think I want to give credit to DeAndre Ayton, and I'll be honest, Sam, maybe we didn't make this clear on that episode previewing the season, but I really never had a doubt that he wasn't going to be a distraction for the Suns, DeAndre Ayton, the lack of a contract extension, because that's just not really who he is. He doesn't complain a lot. He just goes out there and plays. He's incredibly coachable. The players seem to like him. The coaches seem to like him. He's just not going to be a major distraction. So credit to him for working his ass off and trying to earn that max contract after he wasn't offered one, and I think it's going to pay off for him in the end. And credit to the rest of the team. Even though this isn't what the initial question was about, there ended up being something that could have been a potential massive distraction. Something that could have, with other leadership, with different leadership, tanked the entire season, which is the Robert Sarver investigation. And credit to the rest of the team for not allowing that to be a massive distraction for them so far this season, because not only are the Suns playing really well, they've exceeded expectations, I think even the highest expectations for a lot of people so far this season. And sidebar, you were talking about how the trade deadline in the All-Star game was around the same time. Do you remember when, this is random, sorry, do you remember when DeMarcus Cousins was traded during the All-Star game?
Yeah, I do remember that.
That was so bizarre.
What year was that? 3 years ago?
3 or 4 years ago? Yeah, that was when he was traded to the Pelicans, from the Kings to the Pelicans. Yeah. And he was an All-Star, which was already kind of bizarre. I mean, he was very good on the Kings, but yeah, traded during the All-Star game. I wonder if anything like that will happen. Do you have anything else on this distraction question?
No, I'll just tell you right now, I think Ayton is going to be a common theme for today's episode, so I want to save some other stuff we have to say about him for later. But yeah, for now, I think we're good.
The next question was, do the Suns make a trade? Now, I think we've talked about this every episode, last 10 episodes probably.
We can provide very useful analysis now, as we know still absolutely nothing about how this will turn out.
But I think in our preview episode there was 2 types of context for this conversation. One, the regular types of trades that we were talking about, fortifying the loose ends for the Suns, finding another guard, finding another wing at the end of the roster. And then there was the other potential, which is if the Suns stumbled out of the gate, could they look to trade one of their big 4, if you will? Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton. Really, Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton would be the 2 guys that would be potentially moved if they were trying to make a massive move to make a better team. And they didn't stumble. They went on an 18-game win streak, longest in franchise history, and there's no reason to trade any one of the core guys at this time. So that, to me, is solved. Now, whether or not they make a trade at the end of the roster, I think that we're both in agreement that at this point they really should be scouring the trade market, trying to find anything possible to make the end of the bench better, right?
Absolutely, except that the relative value of targets have changed a lot since we recorded the preview. I think we mentioned Thaddeus Young's name a million times in that episode, which was probably always kind of obnoxious then, but it's certainly obnoxious now, as I think our scopes of just the types of guys we're targeting are so different now. And even today, I mean, you see how it changes on a day-by-day basis. We've had a couple of updates in just the past 24 hours to tell us about how potentially the trade market is evolving. For instance, Mike, I know you were on top of this as well. Jake Fisher reporting today that Paul George might not return this season to the LA Clippers. And if that were the case, that is a team that could become sellers at the deadline. What does that mean for the Suns? You were on top of it immediately. I'll let you go for it.
I think the obvious guy on their team that would fit the Suns perfectly is Nick Batum.
And I 1,000% agree. For the
record. Nick Batum, one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA last season. He shot like 50% on corner threes. He's capable of moving the ball really well, fits right into the 0.5 system. A good defender, extremely long-limbed, so he's able to contest shots. But also, I think, which is a major thing for the Suns, is they played consistently as a small ball 5 on that team. So he has a lot of experience at the small ball 5 position, which for the Suns slots him right into what they need. So he could be that wing. You know, in this scenario, the Suns are dealing with right now, we haven't mentioned it, Cameron Johnson's out with an ankle sprain. Fits right into Cameron Johnson's spot, able to do a lot of the things that Cameron Johnson is capable of doing. But beyond that, he's taking minutes away from guys like Ish Wainwright, Abdul Nader, like players that should not be playing in the playoffs, and even in potential series, JaVale McGee. Like, he could just take JaVale McGee's place as the backup center for the Suns against teams like the Warriors, or, you know, the Clippers obviously would be out in this case, so you don't have to worry about them.
Even
the
Utah
Warriors are the
help.
main one.
I mean,
Utah could go small at times.
How did the Clippers get past Utah in the first place?
Exactly.
You know, so there are matchups where this would be very, very obviously beneficial to the Suns. And look, as we watch more games, you know, there's no reason to panic right now about the Suns. It's not about making panic moves. But when you watch this team, especially when you watch this team now and in the coming games without Cam Johnson, it's just so clear they have a dearth of wings. They need another wing. It's really just Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, Mikal Bridges right now. And if any one of those guys goes out, you don't want to play Abdul Nader in the playoffs. You don't want to play Ish Wainwright in the playoffs. Arguably, I don't even know if you want to play Landry Shamet in the playoffs, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, and that was always sort of my fear about Shamet. And to an extent, it was confirmed last night against the Raptors, not just with Shamet, but with Campaign as well.
Yeah.
The Raptors are so long, and obviously they're a team with issues. They're not like, some of the better playoff teams that the Suns will face, where they really have just talented ISO scorer after ISO scorer. But even just with Pascal Siakam, who has not always excelled as an isolation scorer on a per possession basis, like not the most efficient guy, right? But Pascal was still able to very effectively target guys like Campaign and Landry Shamet off of switches when they were on the floor. And so even in a game where Cam Johnson wasn't there, and you have these two guys who ideally are your spark plugs off the bench for scoring, Monty wasn't able to justify giving either one of them more than 15 minutes. And that's a problem going into the playoffs. I think it's a sign of things to come going into the playoffs. You want to have a guy who can be a microwave scorer who gives you 20 or 25 minutes off the bench in the playoffs, but I don't think you're going to get that unless he can be 6'7", 6'8", and defend multiple positions like a Cam Johnson. And so if that can't literally be Cam Johnson, it needs to be someone else that you go out and acquire on the trade market. I don't think it's going to be Shamet or Payne. Unless, there can be games where Payne is playing the game of his life offensively, and, he's totally a passable defender. Same with Shamet, for the record, is a passable defender. Like, neither of these guys are going to get abused constantly, but I think we are starting to see the cracks form where there's only so much that you can rely on guards when you get into the deeper rounds of the playoffs. It's kind of just going to be Chris Paul is running your offense. DeAndre Ayton is your big man. He's your rim runner. And then the rest of the team, Devin Booker included, is kind of a wing, right? So the rest of the team is just wings. That's kind of what you need. You'll have Campaign play 10 minutes in the playoffs just to ensure that you can fill out the point guard rotation with enough actual minutes of a real legitimate point guard. You can have JaVale McGee play 10 minutes. Some matchups he'll get 20. If you play some teams in the first round, for instance, JaVale McGee could get 18 minutes per game. But then as you get deeper into the playoffs, he's going to play closer to 10. And you're going to need someone else to fill in the gaps.
Yeah. And maybe having 7 different centers on the roster could hurt you when it comes to the playoffs, because you can't play those guys.
Batum would be, I know I already said it, but I feel like I didn't address it really directly. Batum, specifically, he would be so good. He's one of the best Swiss Army men of the past 15 years in the NBA. Literally, the only thing he can't do is reliably create offense for himself, but you wouldn't need him to at all in that role. He can defend multiple positions. He can hit the corner three super well.
Make smart passes.
So good with his passing intellect. It's a no-brainer if you could get someone like that.
Yeah.
But even if you can't, we've talked about the other options before. Torrey Craig, Justin Holiday, Kenrich Williams. There are guys out there.
Well, to add to that, because, talking about the amount of centers on the Suns roster, the Celtics were rumored to be interested in Jalen Smith. That was something that posted this morning by a Celtics reporter. Forgive me, I do not remember his name. But the issues with trading Jalen Smith remain the same. Jalen Smith cannot be offered more than $4.7 million by any team that acquires him for his next contract as a starting salary. That means that any team that trades for him, if he has a breakout year for them, could just lose him for nothing at the end of that contract. So it's the likelihood of the Suns giving up Jalen Smith for essentially nothing at the trade deadline is extremely high at this point. And I think that's probably going to be the case with Jalen Smith, since he's not even signed for next year. But somebody like Grant Williams for the Celtics, if the Suns were to make a trade with the Celtics, if they're willing to part with Grant Williams, it would be a good addition to the Suns as well. Shoots 41%, 6'6", plays the wing position. Not an excellent defender, but not a complete turnstile on defense, so capable of defending in the right situation. That could be someone that the Suns could look for as well, if that rumor is true, and they're interested enough in him to get him, but maybe not interested enough in him to guarantee that they can keep him at the end of the contract. This is the issue with trading Jalen Smith at this point. The Suns might even just waive him.
So we've talked about it before, and I understand why teams would have that hesitation. But on the other hand, like I've also said in the past, who is trading for Jalen Smith to suddenly give him 35 minutes a game and let him, totally break out Christian Wood style and average 20 and 10 a game? I just don't think there's a market out there. I don't think there's any team in the league, really, unless he was going to literally go to, like, Detroit that would just let him do that. I think the average team that's going to potentially be interested in Jalen Smith is bringing him in to be a rotation piece who plays 15 minutes a game. And he could play well in that role. And the right team that commits to developing him, as we've said in the past, mainly as a 5, not as a 4, although he did play some decent minutes of the 4 last night. If he can hit that 3, it really just makes it a lot more viable. The average team is really bringing him in to just play that sort of role player, deep end of the rotation role. And for that, he could excel in that role, but no one's going to offer you a $10 million per year offer sheet based on that. I think the typical offer sheet, like if you're Jalen Smith, you're hoping someone can trade for you for the rest of the season, give you a consistent 15 minutes per game, and then you're hoping that based on that, someone offers you half of their MLE, which would be exactly $4.5 million or whatever the max is that he would be allowed to be re-signed for from whatever team he would be coming off his current contract with at the end of the season, right? No one's going to offer you $8 to $10 million because you played 14 minutes per game for the Celtics, right? So I do sort of understand where the hesitation comes from, but also I don't think he has to worry about it that much, or I don't think these teams rather have to worry about it that much. I don't think the market is really there like that for Jalen Smith. There could be a market, but he's still sort of in the, just because you had 5 or 6 games. I mean, Lance Stevenson looks great right now. You know, we're in weird times. Not every player who puts together a good week is a future star. And exactly. I do like Jalen, and I think he has skills, but he's still very much in the prove to me that you're an NBA player phase, not the, okay, I'm ready to pay you money like you're one of the 6 or 7 best players on my roster phase. He's not there.
Yeah, for the record, Jalen Smith also asked the coaching staff, or told the coaching staff, that he feels more comfortable at center, which is a position the Suns do not have minutes for him at. So it's going to be interesting to follow that story for the rest of the season, because I imagine his time with the Suns is going to be short. Sorry to the Jalen Smith fans out there.
We're all Jalen Smith fans to an extent.
That's true.
Let's be honest. Shopping, not my thing. You know, I go to the store. There's a lot of people that, it's just not my thing. It's not football. All right. I spend way too long scrolling websites just looking for something simple like a nice pair of jeans. And I'm either overwhelmed by all the choices or can't find anything my style and end up with stuff that doesn't fit and doesn't work. That's why I use Stitch Fix. You just take a quick style quiz, share your size, your vibe, and your budget, and boom. You're matched with a real human, stylists who handle the rest. They take care of the work for you. They send you a fix box with clothes that actually fit and make sense for your life, work, weekends, whatever. It saves you time. You look great, and you don't even have to think about it. That's the best part. It's no risk, all style. Try it all on in the comfort of your home. Keep what works, send back the rest. Free shipping and returns, always, and no subscription required. Plus, get a free try-on for your first fix. Get started today at stitchfix.com/podcast to get $20 off your first order, and they'll waive your styling fee. That's stitchfix.com/podcast.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnyWalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.
All right, next question that we asked in our season preview episode. You asked this one, and my answer was no, even in the episode. Will Chris Paul reduce his workload? Make the case. And what do you think about that question now?
Well, there's 2 ways to go about it. So the obvious way to frame it is, will Chris Paul reduce his workload in terms of minutes played and in terms of games played? Will he start to take back-to-backs off? Will he rest a little bit more often? I think I made a reference to in that episode. I said, well, he played 32 minutes per game in his first season for the Suns. This would be a good season to scale it back to 27 or 28, have a little bit fresher legs for the playoffs. That has not happened. The resting back-to-backs thing has not happened. The Suns are now in hot pursuit. Not in hot pursuit. They are currently the first seed. For portions of the season, they've been in hot pursuit of the first seed. But they're going to continue to be in this battle where they want as much home court advantage as they can get. And it doesn't look like Chris Paul, and this should not surprise anyone, is willing to sacrifice minutes or willing to sacrifice games played to get there. However, Mike, the other half of the question, or I guess just the other way you could analyze it, right? Will Chris Paul take on a lighter workload in terms of his personal offensive responsibility to let other players shine? And that's absolutely happened, right?
Yeah.
He's taking a full 2 shots fewer per game over last season, or per 36 minutes at least, I think it is. So that's like a solid 10 to 15% drop in his shot attempts as he's trying, putting more of an effort into feeding guys like Cameron Johnson, DeAndre Ayton, not really Mikal Bridges. We'll touch more on that later, I guess, but kind of some of these other moving parts in the Suns rotation, the guys 3 through 6 or 3 through 7. So he's still Mr. Clutch in the fourth quarter, in the last 5 minutes. He shows up when he has to. But how many times have we seen Chris Paul roll into the second half of a game this year where he still only has 1 or 2 shot attempts? It's becoming a very common occurrence.
Yeah. And even beyond that, a lot of the reasons that the Suns' pace is up this season is not because Chris Paul's grabbing the ball and sprinting down the court. It's because he's getting rid of the ball relatively early in a lot of situations, and that's helped the Suns speed up the pace. So I think that was a good way to frame it. It's the way you framed it when you asked it. The first part of the question was, will he take back-to-backs off? He has yet to do that. In fact, only 2 players on the Suns have played every single game this season, and those 2 players are Chris Paul and Mikal Bridges. So we know that they're not really planning on taking any time off if they can avoid it. And I imagine still Chris Paul will not take time off, maybe second nights of back-to-backs or rest days the rest of the season. It's just not the way he plays. But taking less shots, finding other guys, trying to get other guys to step up their game a little bit is huge for him, and it's huge for the team. And I think at times people can get frustrated with Chris Paul and his not looking for his own shot. But look, it's the long game at this point. Chris Paul knows that in order for the Suns to win an NBA title, other guys need to step up, which we'll talk about next. Other guys need to step up in order for them to do that. That means in the regular season, if he's taking a few less shots a game, then that's good, because other guys need to find ways to score as well in order for the Suns to win. So it turns out Chris Paul is not reducing his workload, but maybe he kind of is, I guess, is the answer to that question, right?
Right.
The next question, well, let's touch on this one first. Can the Suns stay healthy? Because I think this is related to that. Maybe a little out of order from how we talked about it in the season preview, but I just mentioned it. 2 guys have played every single game so far this season. Chris Paul and Mikal Bridges. The Suns have not stayed healthy. In fact, they've played just over half of their games with both Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton in the lineup, something like 24 games, I think, so far this season, with both of those guys in the lineup, and the rest of the games, one of them was out, or at times both of them were out, I think, for a few games. So it turns out they can't really stay healthy, and that's the case with the rest of the NBA so far this season. Whether it be injuries like Devin Booker or DeAndre Ayton, or it could be COVID, like something that's been happening to every team so far this season. The Suns are not staying healthy so far, but that has yet to really affect them negatively. They're still at the top of the league. It's kind of surprising, right, that they have had these injuries and they're still at the top of the league.
I mean, they're 31-9, having missed 14 games of DeAndre Ayton, 7 games of Devin Booker, several games each of Crowder, Payne, McGee, Shamet, no Saric still, no Frank Kaminsky after he played out of his mind for like a 9 or 10 game stretch. Imagine where they would be if they were at last year's levels of continuity. Could they be like 35-5, right? And, it's not really fair to play that game because every team, gets hit with the injury bug eventually. And certainly you just hope that the Suns can even maintain this level of health that they've sustained so far this season. I would love to see a full season, knock on wood, of Mikal Bridges and Chris Paul, for instance. That would be awesome. Mm-hmm. But yeah, when they do get hit, with these little situations. They have shown an ability to persevere and fight and play through adversity, and that's really all you can ask for from them out of this stage. So as you mentioned, like on the season preview episode, there's never really, it was not that it was a dumb question because it's a question that you have to address, but it's not the most interesting question from an analytical perspective, because what are you going to say on an episode like that? You're going to be like, will the Suns stay healthy?
I hope they do. Yeah.
I hope they do. And, our answer is still, I hope they do. But, I think it is a worthy point to be made, just that the main knock on the Suns last year was, oh, look at how much continuity they have because they didn't get injured like other teams got injured. Well, now we've seen them play over 20 games without their second or third best player, and they're still the number one record in the NBA. That means something. It really does.
Yep, I agree. And I think credit to them for how well they've played. Something we brought up in that episode that I forgot about until I re-listened to it, was that the Suns specifically talked about how they were tracking in their practice facility the amount of dribbles by Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and how the more dribbles they take, whether it be in a game or in a practice, the more tired they are later on, the more it affects their play later on. The Suns have been extremely good in the clutch so far this season, and Chris Paul has taken a little more time off the ball than he did in previous seasons. And I think that's not a coincidence. The Suns are tracking their dribbles and trying to reduce that workload on both of them so that they could be good at the end of the season and at the end of individual games. And so far, so good. So that's working for them, and hopefully that will translate into them being healthier at the end of the year, because ultimately the Suns were battling injuries in the playoffs, whether or not people like to talk about it. Next question. Can the Suns find a consistent third option? And we talked about potential guys to do that in our season preview episode. And they did, right?
But not
it's DeAndre
in the way
Ayton.
you think. Well, no. Because the consistent third option now is Chris Paul.
That's a good point.
I mean, it literally is in points per game. And what actually happened was the Suns found a consistent second option in DeAndre Ayton. Even if, to some Suns fans, it doesn't feel like it all the time, right? People still complain. I understand if it doesn't always feel like it. I mean, Chris Paul, he touches the ball for a reason, because he's one of the best to ever do it. But Chris Paul, with the amount that he's actually shooting, kind of is your third option now. But this is another opportunity to bring up really DeAndre Ayton, because that's really who we have to talk about in terms of development here.
Let's actually hold off on DeAndre and talk about him next, because we have a question directly related to him.
Sure, that's fine.
And let's talk about the other guys real quick, because the other guy that we talked about being the potential third option for the Suns was Mikal Bridges. And to be honest, I feel like we've been almost beating up on Mikal Bridges for his lack of development offensively so far this season. And I don't really want to do that necessarily, because I do think he's been good offensively, and I think defensively he's been better than he was last season, which is a surprising improvement. But he still has yet to become someone that is a third option on this team, or gives me or you, I think, any confidence that that's something that he's going to be at least anytime soon. Maybe in the future he could take some sort of ball handling leaps that could allow him to be better in that department, or maybe even over the course of the rest of the season, the second half of the season, he could develop something or just get the confidence to do that. But so far, he has yet to do that. You don't have to spend a lot of time on this if you don't want to, Sam, but do you have any thoughts on that not being Mikal Bridges?
No, we have to bring it up because actually, as I was listening back to the episode, both of us instantly thought it would be Mikal Bridges, right? Neither of us answered DeAndre Ayton. We were both wrong. So it's important to discuss why that has been. I think for my part, I probably underrated just how much energy is expended in the type of defensive role that Mikal Bridges has, which is even more present now than it's ever been. For a couple seasons now, he's been the guy who takes the hardest assignment on the perimeter. But if you look at the actual data, this season he's doing it even more than he has in the past. Like now,
and almost more than anyone else in the league. I believe he's in the 99th percentile of guarding the number one usage guy on the floor.
Yes. So there's a certain level of energy loss that has to be accounted for, where it's just like you can't ask Mikal to do everything. He can't be both a high octane scorer and the best perimeter defender in the NBA. No one has that much energy. Really, that I can think of, or those who do in the past have just been incredibly unprecedented. It kind of reminds me actually of after Kawhi Leonard won Defensive Player of the Year when he started becoming a first option scorer with the Spurs. And in those immediate seasons before he left the Spurs, when he started becoming a 20-point per game option, the Spurs were always worse defensively with Kawhi on the floor as opposed to where they were the couple of seasons prior. And that wasn't just because of Kawhi, it was just because of a variety of things. But it reminds me of that a little bit, where once you become the guy, you're not going to be the same player defensively because it's just impossible. You're human and there's only so much you can do. So it does remind me of that a little bit. However, the thing that's frustrating with Mikal is it's not just a matter of him being not being a third option scorer this year. I looked at the stats, and of the 9 Suns to log at least 500 minutes so far this year, so really the 9 main guys who have been like the core, Bridges is tied for last in shot attempts per 36 at just 10.1. He's tied with Jay Crowder.
Right.
He's taking fewer shots. He's taking fewer threes. He's taking fewer free throws on a per 36 basis compared to last year. So it does feel, not only like he's not taking a step forward, but sometimes to me, it does kind of feel like he's taking a step back offensively too, in just a way that I don't want. So that's been the worry with Mikal, and I think it also wouldn't bother me so much about Mikal Bridges, just kind of staying in this offensive role if we didn't have the contrast of, well, here's Cam Johnson.
Exactly. That's
who's
the other
playing,
part of this conversation. Yeah.
Cam Johnson, who's playing his 25-minute per game role. And another guy who I've been wrong on in the past, by the way, Cam Johnson is a guy who I've often said I think is going to be a great role player for a long time, but I don't necessarily know if I see the ceiling in Cam Johnson that other Suns fans see. That's something I've said about Cam Johnson. But then Cam Johnson has come out, especially in the past 20 games, which is why it sucks so much that he's injured right now, and just knocked his role out of the park and played like an absolute superstar. Not, superstar in relative terms. Superstar relative to where we expected
superstar
him to be.
in his role.
Cam Johnson let me just say, Cam Johnson is 5th of those 9 players who've played at least 500 minutes. Cam Johnson is 5th on a per minute basis of how many shots he takes. He's taking 8 threes per 36 minutes. That's more than double the amount as Mikal Bridges. And Mikal Bridges has other skills in his bag too. He's got the mid-range. You don't want to take that away. He's got the cutting. Can't take that away from him. But it's just Cam Johnson is taking shots that Mikal doesn't take. And yeah, at a certain point, you got to look at that, and you got to look at the actual profiles of the guys and wonder why that is.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's the other main thing specifically for this conversation is just sort of understanding that Cameron Johnson is coming in there and closer. When he was starting, a lot of those games without DeAndre Ayton as well, he was the third option in that offense. And at times even, like you said, the second option in those scenarios. And he has been extremely, extremely good in those situations. And credit to Cameron Johnson. I think he's stepped up in ways that I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to do this season. Not just necessarily because I didn't think he was capable of it, but I didn't know that there was going to be this type of role and opportunity for him to be able to do it. And he's made the case. He's out right now with an ankle injury, but he's made the case that he should be a guy getting 30 to 35 minutes a night on the Suns, where I don't know that we were necessarily really sure about that before. It wasn't Mikal Bridges, and it wasn't Cameron Johnson technically that were the guys that became that. But I think talking about those two guys differently is something that maybe we didn't really expect in the preseason. So shout out to Cameron Johnson for playing so well. And Mikal Bridges, I think we should mention, he did dislocate his finger, and he was even fiddling with it yesterday after poking at some loose balls and stuff like that. It's still wrapped. I don't think he still feels fully confident in that finger so far after that happened. And I'm actually just taking a look. 3-point attempts per game, 4.4, 9.9 field goal attempts since then. I was curious if that was different than his season averages. It's not really. It's relatively similar to what his season averages are. But yeah, let's talk about Ayton, though. Because the next question that we had on our season preview was, what can DeAndre Ayton add to his game? We both had questions on DeAndre Ayton in that season preview. And I think that it's kind of fascinating to go back and listen to that, because we talked a lot about the short role for DeAndre Ayton. And there was a brief moment in the season where it was like, okay, it's happening. The Suns are getting trapped a lot. They're giving the ball to DeAndre Ayton in space. He's finding ways to create out of that short roll. And then it kind of went away. You know, we started to put together clips for a video, and then they stopped doing it. But they stopped doing it for a good reason. And I'm going to give a shout out, if you haven't read it already, read David Nash's recent post about DeAndre Ayton's hook shot, because I think so much of DeAndre Ayton's game was replaced with a seal on a switch or a low man on a trap that has turned into him getting really close to the basket, catching it close to the basket, and just hooking it in. And, you know, the short roll playmaking is something that I still would like to see more of from DeAndre Ayton. But it turns out that his points are really coming from getting as close to possible to the basket off the ball and really scoring in the post. And that's something that you and I, Sam, didn't really predict before the season started.
No, not at all. Per David's article, DeAndre is shooting 59.3% on those hook shots, and he even made the comparison of sort of throwing a three-headed hydra out there. And, you know, Devin Booker, we know that he's improved his pull-up three quite a bit. It's close to 40% now, or I think it might still be above 40%. Chris Paul, that elbow jumper is right around, what would it be? I guess like in the upper 50s, close to 60%. But the point is, DeAndre Ayton's hook shot, Chris Paul's elbow jumper, Devin Booker's pull-up three are becoming, as David demonstrated, sort of three signature moves of the Suns' offense that are equally balanced, as all things should be, to give the Suns the best possible offense where, yeah, you can go to any of those guys kind of in clutch situations. And yeah, so I mean, about Ayton, like, yes, we started emphasizing the short roll quite a bit, and we did see that for a while, but ever since then, as you've talked about, it's about the work he does before the shot, right? It's about figuring out how to use his body, and it's about also, because we've said a million times, it's not about just force feeding him touches in the post, which I think it's important to draw the distinction there. These hook shots that he gets in rhythm are a very smart way for the Suns to integrate him more fluidly into the offense that do not hurt the rhythm of the offense, do not hurt the flow, and are very different from just force feeding. The type of stuff you might have seen in DeAndre Ayton's first or second season. It's just, it doesn't, it might look the same technically, like it's a similar shot in terms of like shot distance, but there are a lot of differences there between those two things.
I'll say it again. The difference to me is being able to score on a defender and being able to score when you're wide open. A lot of his shots at the rim would come on lobs and stuff like that, but the fact that he has a consistent move to go to at the rim against smaller defenders is going to be huge for the Suns. The reason we talked about the short roll, and I want to make sure to say this before I forget, the reason we talk so much about the short roll is because the Suns needed a counter to when Chris Paul specifically, or Devin Booker, were trapped by ball handlers. So on pick and rolls, two defenders come at the ball handler, and that means the Suns need to find some sort of counter to that. Now, the short roll is a counter to that, giving the ball to the defender that, or the offensive player that essentially has no defenders on them. But the other option, and this is something I documented on Twitter, and I'll try to remember to repost it today in case people missed it, is what the Suns are doing is using what I call, or what is called, a hockey assist in order to counter that. And that means that Chris Paul, Devin Booker, whoever it is, if they're trapped on the wing, another wing player will sort of flash to the top of the key at the top of the three-point line. The ball will swing to that player, and the low man, who is essentially the guy who moves to the middle of the floor to guard the rim, DeAndre Ayton will seal on that low man, and the ball will swing from the ball handler to the top of the key and then down into the low post, whether it be JaVale McGee or DeAndre Ayton. So the Suns have essentially replaced short roll playmaking for a flash to the top of the key and using the hockey assist to find ways to get DeAndre Ayton the ball under the rim. Here's the main reason that works. It's because the help defender is coming off of the corners. And that means that a big man, the person that was assigned to guard DeAndre Ayton, is on the ball handler. The help defender is going to be smaller than DeAndre Ayton. There is ways to take advantage of that by giving DeAndre Ayton the ball in the middle of the floor. But if you can seal off on the low man, who's ultimately going to be smaller than DeAndre Ayton, underneath the basket, and find a way to get to the ball directly to DeAndre Ayton under the basket, that's the best shot you can take on the floor 100 times out of 100, and the Suns can do that as much as they possibly can. So they found a way to counter the trap that's not necessarily the short roll.
Sure. And I will say, if it works, it works. So keep doing it. But just to point out, like the whole flashing thing and then sealing and feeding a big off of the flash is a very fundamental type of playing basketball that typically we haven't seen out of Monty Williams in kind of a lot of the other intricacies of what his scheme involves exactly, at least since he's become coach of the Phoenix Suns. It feels like a concession a little bit of short roll playmaking is very much like every team wants short roll playmaking out of their bigs. And it's one of the main things that scouts are really looking for when they're trying to fill the skilled modern big archetype is a guy who can collect the ball in the short roll and really feel comfortable putting the ball on the floor. So to replace that with the flashing and the sealing, it works. So keep doing it. But also it does feel like a bit of a concession on, maybe you just don't have that modern skill that we wanted. So let's do this instead.
You know what it reminds me of? Igor used to do this. Igor Kokoshkov, the former coach of the Phoenix Suns. They used to have plays that would allow DeAndre Ayton to catch the ball closer to the rim, similar to this. I think Ayton has improved skill-wise since then, which allows him to be more efficient when he touches it there. But the other thing is, to your point, Sam, really, really great defensive teams, the ball has to go a long ways from the three-point line to underneath the basket in the post, and that's a lob pass, so that's the slowest pass you can make. Really great defensive teams are going to pick that off. That pass is a difficult pass, and it makes it difficult. The easier pass is often just the bounce pass to the place on the floor with no defenders in the short roll. So the Suns need to find ways to get him to be comfortable in that short roll while still taking advantage of the low man who is a smaller guy in that scenario. So I think it's just been really interesting to see how the Suns have countered those traps so far, and I think Ayton has added that hook shot, and more even beyond that. I think the reason it took a while for this specific play to develop was that ultimately there's a timer on that seal if he's standing in the paint, and that means you have to seal at the exact perfect time. Specifically on traps, it's as soon as the ball swings over to the connector piece, that's when you seal, because if he starts sealing as soon as the trap comes, he's going to be in the paint for more than 3 seconds, and that sort of understanding and chemistry with your teammates takes a while to develop, and he's been very good offensively this season.
The internal clock that you have to develop at both ends of the ball if you're an NBA big man, playing specifically NBA basketball versus, say, college basketball, I mean, it's really hard, and I think it's a really underrated part that people take for granted of learning to be a skilled big at this level. It's just that constant running clock of not spending too long in the paint, be it on offense or defense. It's really challenging.
And I think we've seen a little bit of growing pains with DeAndre Ayton so far this season. There's been more 3-second calls than I remember. But it's worthwhile.
Yeah, maybe. I would like to see a stat on that. I personally, anecdotally, I can't remember if there have been more this year than last. But yeah, it's been interesting.
Anything else to talk about? I know we've talked about DeAndre Ayton a lot so far, but anything else to add there with Ayton?
No, I think I'm excited for the next and final question, though, because I think it's big picture thinking.
And it's changed. The last question is, how will the West shake out? Now, this question was essentially, what will the Suns face in the playoffs by the end of the season? Now, we barely talked about the Warriors.
I do. Be honest. That episode. No, be honest. I don't think we mentioned the Warriors.
Yeah, we talked about the Clippers, which now they might. As we mentioned, Paul George might be out the rest of the season. Kawhi Leonard might not come back. The extent
of our conversation was saying, "Oh, I'm still scared," and you agreed with me, by the way. So it wasn't just me. Before you fuckers come after me talking about my favorite team or whatever, saying the Clippers. Oh, we're still scared of the Clippers if they come back healthy.
And yes, that's a rightful concern still.
And then more or less clowning on the Lakers of thinking, oh, it's probably not going to work, but what if it works? We have to take them seriously as a threat anyway. And I think actually you said, if I do remember correctly, something to the extent of the Lakers are not going to work in the regular season, but it doesn't matter because they'll be fine come playoff time, which Are you still there, or have you completely given up on
What
that
I
proposition?
mentioned was I think the Lakers just need to find a few lineups that work by the end of the season in order for them to be a threat in the playoffs. And arguably that's happening as we speak. And that has essentially turned Russell Westbrook into an off-the-ball player. And this is without Anthony Davis. If they can find a way to integrate Anthony Davis back into whatever they're doing, and if they make trades, yeah, I'm still a little bit worried about them. I'm not. It hasn't worked so far, but they still have LeBron James and a potential healthy Anthony Davis when it comes to the NBA playoffs. Would I favor the Suns? Yeah, I still would. I would definitely favor the Suns.
Of course you would.
But I don't think they're going to be just an obvious pushover if they even make it to the playoffs. There's a possibility of them not even making it.
And so the crazier part of all that is we spent the vast majority of that segment talking about the teams that are now the 7th and 8th seed in the Western Conference.
I think we mentioned the Jazz.
I think we mentioned the Jazz, but I don't think we didn't really talk about the Jazz. We didn't really talk about the Jazz.
No,
we didn't. I mean, obviously, we didn't mention the Grizzlies, which, by the way, okay,
this is huge. Yes.
Let's start. Okay, but I do want to get to the Grizzlies. Let's just start with the Warriors. So we didn't mention the Warriors. They are public enemy number one. I mean, at this point, right? It's established. It's confirmed. There is no team. I think there are several teams in the Western Conference that would stand a chance, at least, against the Suns in a series that you have to properly game plan for and account for. But the Warriors might be the only team where even I would say, yeah, the Suns are probably an underdog there, at least with how the roster is currently constructed.
Yeah.
And I believe that even despite the 1-game advantage you currently have in the standings, and even despite the kind of bearish projections that I've had of Klay Thompson's return in the past, I still don't believe that Klay is going to be exactly the boon to the Warriors' offense or obviously defense that people think he'll be. And I actually think limiting Gary Payton II's minutes in any kind of way could end up being a disaster for them. But despite all of that, the Warriors are the team that you need to get by right now. There are other teams that could beat you, but they are the team.
Yep, I agree. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that's who it is. Unless they suffer some sort of major injury, that's by far the most dangerous team. And essentially, they are a contender as long as Draymond Green and Steph Curry are healthy. Now, if Klay Thompson isn't quite Klay Thompson, they're still a major threat. If Klay Thompson is Klay Thompson, they're by far the best team in the NBA because Klay Thompson can do a lot of things on both ends of the ball. And really makes it hard to... The type of focus that the Suns have had on Steph Curry when guarding the Warriors has worked against Steph Curry only. And if you add another guy like Klay Thompson that can just fire off 10 threes in a game, on the other end of that, when everyone's focused on Steph Curry, it becomes essentially impossible to guard them. So we'll see how that comes out. But the Memphis Grizzlies, we have to mention, they've won 10 straight and are just amazing. Amazing to watch. Defensively, incredibly sound. Offensively, they are finely tuned at this point. They have Desmond Bane, who is essentially Klay Thompson now, outside of the large man that Klay Thompson is. And then they have Ja Morant, who is probably at this point 1 or 2 in the MVP discussion. He's really up there in that MVP discussion.
That's a bold thing to say. He's definitely in the top 5. He might be 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Steph's going to win with the kind of stats he's putting up at this point.
I mean, Steph is struggling. Steph is struggling. Durant sure as hell doesn't deserve it with the way the Nets are playing. So this has been one of the most bizarre MVP races I've seen in a while. I mean,
it feels like 2011, right? Like Derrick Rose MVP.
Yeah, it does. No, that's a good point. And statistically, look, I think it's still Jokic if you really want to just use
but they're not
going
to do that.
But they're not going to do that because they're not winning.
They're 500. Yeah.
But I mean, look, I think Ja's establishing himself as one of the better players in the NBA. I mean, he's been that for a while. One of the best players in the NBA, if you will, top 15, top something like that. But the Grizzlies just have a much stronger base of slightly above replacement level role players that they can throw at you like 5 through 10 in their rotation that a team like the Nuggets just doesn't have. I mean, Jokic is playing with.
Yeah, that used to be what they had. That was
Jokic
the Nuggets' strength.
Yeah, Jokic is playing with real scraps, whereas Morant is a ceiling raiser. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's playing amazing, but I don't think it's quite the same level. Now, all of that aside, so here are the Memphis Grizzlies. They're on pace right now for 55, 56 wins. They are tied with the Utah Jazz for the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. They don't have the tiebreaker, so currently they're 4th. Are they a playoff threat, though?
Yeah.
It's one thing to win a lot of games, but are they a playoff threat?
Yeah, I think they are. I think that people should not discount them at this point. There are a few wins. I think 2 wins behind the Suns at this point. They have 5 more losses because they've played significantly more games.
Okay.
But they are right behind the Suns as far as wins goes.
I can get there, but you need to talk me into a couple of principles first, right? So first of all, because I think people could draw a comparison to the Suns from last year, for instance. Well, the Suns made that leap, so why couldn't the Grizzlies? The Suns had Chris Paul and Jay Crowder. The Grizzlies have Steven Adams and Kyle Anderson. There's a difference. The Grizzlies do not have a veteran with substantial playoff experience above the... I mean, they only have 2 players in the... Adams and Anderson are the only 2 players in the rotation, I think, above the age of 25 to begin with. And of those 2 players, Adams made the Western Conference Finals a couple of times when he was on a rookie contract deal and a bench player with the Thunder. Kyle Anderson made it with the Western Conference Finals back when he was on the Spurs, also as a rookie contract player. I mean, it was a long time ago for these guys, and they are veterans, and they are good players. They're exactly like I said. They're solid, like floor-establishing players who will keep you in the hunt for a playoff spot, even without the Ja Morant-type superstar to lead them. But, I mean, you know, really? It feels like a team. It feels like a team to me that is gonna burn really bright in the regular season, and they'll win their first round matchup. I mean, they could take it to a team like if the Lakers crawl up the standings a little bit and it ends up being Memphis 4, Lakers 5. Like they could pound LeBron in the first round, and I would enjoy watching it a lot. But are they really? I mean, I think they're a year away. I'm not prepared to put them exactly in the same tier. They could be in the same tier as Utah. They're not in the same tier as Phoenix.
They're like the Hawks last year, I think,
State.
is what you're... I would compare them to what the Hawks did last year. And here's what I'll say.
I mean, just think about the precedent for a team like that. You know, for a team that young to make, let's say they have to make the Western Conference Finals at least, right? For a team that young to be real contender type, you need to be that 2011 Thunder team that had like 3 future MVPs. And like Ja is really good. Des Bane is pretty good. They're not that. You know, they're not 22-year-old Kevin Durant.
Des Bane is really good. I just want to make a point. Desmond Bane has been extremely good so far this season.
Is he number 2 on a contending team level with no playoff experience?
Here's what I think. I think their audacity is not a weakness. It is a strength. The fact that they are continually outperforming what people expect them to be, to me, is not a reason to write them off. I think it's a reason to build them up. I think teams like that often people are maybe a step or 2 behind on figuring out how good the individual players are, is more a problem with the way that a lot of people dissect the game than an issue with them as far as how their team is built. I think they're right there, and I think that maybe you're right in that they need somebody who has like a high level of playoff experience to get them to the NBA Finals. Yeah, I think that part is probably true, but I think getting to the Western Conference Finals is not out of the question for them. I think they can take a lot of teams by surprise.
I don't think it's out of the question. I think they certainly could. But also I just look at the way their roster is constructed, and I just can't quite get myself to believe that they can build a sustainable strategy to beat a Phoenix, Golden State, or Utah in the second round over the course of a 7-game series, right? Like, talk me into this as well. They are second in the NBA in transition possessions per game. Ja Morant is amazing at blowing by guys. He's improved a lot as a three-point shooter. His in-between game is not really there. And, you know, like for a team that is being led by this guy where they have an MVP candidate type case and they don't really have the secondary, tertiary scores that you could really expect, I mean, I don't know, dude. They don't feel like they're built for deep playoff basketball yet. They could get there, and maybe they'll surprise me, but it just doesn't. It feels like a regular season team, not a playoff team to me yet. And that certainly is not something that Memphis fans should be ashamed of at this point. And I'm sure if any Memphis fans
they're going to hate you if they hear this. Yeah.
If any Memphis fans hear this, they're going to tell me to go fuck myself, and rightly so. Whatever, stand your guys. I get it, but I'm just saying, there's no shame in the Grizzlies surpassing all expectations and winning 55 games this year and losing in the second round to Phoenix, Golden State, or Utah. There's no shame in that. And I think that is the most likely scenario for this team. I'm not prepared to put them in the same tier.
Well, I will say, if you're a betting man, then yeah, you're probably right. But I just would not be surprised to see them in the Western Conference Finals, depending on how things shake out in the matchups specifically. I don't think it would take much. And it maybe, this is triggering to Suns fans, but maybe they get some injury luck to get there. That's something that could happen.
Now you're an asshole. Yeah, no, it's possible.
True. It's true.
Yeah, it's possible.
It doesn't take much.
Look,
one guy rolls his ankle, misses 2 games. The Grizzlies are in the Western Conference Finals. One guy rolls his ankle, misses 3 games. They could be in the finals. It's not. I don't think it's out of the question. I think they're the type of team that could get there.
Chris Paul goes down in 1 round. They get past the Suns. Now they're in the Western Conference Finals. Oh, look, Draymond goes down. Yeah, maybe they get...
Draymond goes down, anyone could beat the Warriors at this point. He's that important to them.
No, honestly. And yeah, then you're in the finals all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. But here's an interesting question, just before we wrap this up. I said I don't exactly believe in their ability to get by Utah, Phoenix, and Golden State, but Utah, Phoenix, and Golden State might be the 3 best teams in the NBA.
Right.
If you had the injury luck and could get by Utah, Phoenix, and Golden State,
the Bucks are going to kill them.
You think?
If the Bucks make it to the finals, yeah.
Because I think, I mean, look, you put that Memphis team up against Chicago. Talk about another team with no playoff experience.
That's fair. But the Bucks are different.
Miami has experience, but not necessarily the roster construction. Brooklyn's a fucking mess. Like, there's not a team in the East exactly. I guess there's the Bucks.
The Bucks. Giannis is allowed to foul you on his way to the rim.
Yeah, he is.
If Giannis is allowed to bowl you over on the way to the rim, nobody can defend him. And
I will say
I'm not even saying that the refs are calling it wrong. It just is what it is.
There are a lot of teams that I'm tempted to judge by their regular season performance even when they shouldn't. Like, I relish the opportunity to talk shit on the Nets now anytime they lose a game because their defense sucks and everyone deserves to talk about it. It's like, you get that much spotlight, you have 3 MVPs supposedly, and your defense sucks this bad. People should be talking about it. But the one team I can't really bring myself there with is Milwaukee, because regular season stat-wise, they've struggled. Obviously, they've lost some guys to COVID. They've had some injuries just like anyone else. But in the playoffs, they're gonna attain a new level. They're gonna reach a new height.
Yeah,
because
as long as they're healthy, yes.
It's a different game in the playoffs, and also, like you said, Giannis is he. It's like he's playing a different sport sometimes, so they'll be just fine.
Yes, that was all of the preseason questions from our season preview. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you're interested in more content, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thetimeline. We will be doing a live playback watch party this Friday against the Indiana Pacers with potentially having some guests.
Featuring guest, and hopefully a much better result than the last 2 playbacks these past 2 weeks, which have both been sore losses. But hey, we're 3-2 on the season, just to lay the record out there. We're 3-2 on playbacks. If we lose on Friday and we drop down to 500, I will be a little bit concerned. But for now, I think we're in the clear.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We will be back soon.
This episode is brought to you by Ro. Confidence is everything. Women can sense it. And trust me, they love it. But if you're in your head worried about performance, that swag, unfortunately, gentlemen, it's gone. Rose Sparks keeps you ready. When the moment hits, you can step up like a superhero and handle your business. No doubt, just confidence.
Fellas, Rose Sparks gets you ready fast, dissolving under your tongue and working in 15 minutes on average. No waiting, no missing the moment, plus it stays active up to 36 hours.
So when the mood hits, you can go back to back to back, round after round after round. Ro connects guys with medical provider 100% online, so there's no awkward conversation with in-person providers. Go to ro.com/sparks to see if you qualify. If prescribed, new sexual health patients gets $15 off Sparks on reoccurring plan. Connect with the provider at ro.co/fourth to find out if prescriptions Ro Sparks are right for you. That's ro.co/fourth for $15 off your first order. If approved, treatment ships directly to their door. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and or manufacturing review. For full safety information, go to ro.co/safety info.